involved in that quite a bit, and I'm really looking forward to it. And I think it's going to be a very exciting time. It's going to be a big learning curve for all of us. This is, I suppose, if you think about IDEA and what we've done so far, this will be the first time that we've engaged in such a large campaign, and it's definitely going to be something that we'll learn on the go with. But the most important thing about it is, I think, is that it's your campaign. So you are the network that will come up with the ideas. It's going to be your passions and your ideas about what's important that will drive the campaign. So IDEA's role, my role, and Elaine's role is to facilitate that. And I guess, so in bearing that in mind, I want you to think about the European Citizens Initiative creatively. It's part of the project that we will use the European Citizens Initiative, so I guess in that respect we're obliged to do it. But I want you to think about it as a tool for achieving the aims of the project, not as an end in itself. And it's very difficult to do that sometimes when you get stuck into it because it's a huge thing to do. But I think the most important thing is to always remember the bigger picture here. What are we really trying to achieve and how can we use this tool to achieve it? And it's a collaborative project. We're going to be coming up with a campaign with young people from 6 other countries. So it's really, there's a huge amount of collaboration that has to take place. But for us to succeed, I think, in the aims of the project, I think we have to think of purpose as the invisible leader in this collaborative effort. So, that's, once we're really, really clear on the purpose, that should make everything else kind of clear about how we approach this. So the ECI is European Citizens Initiative. I went to, by the way, I have no background in European policy or anything like this, so this is all new to me as well. I went to Brussels on the 15th of April to what was called ECI Day, and it was organised by the the Economic and Social Committee there, and they brought lots of people together to reflect on the ECI because it's now 2 years old. It was introduced with the Lisbon Treaty, and it's been around for 2 years. So the purpose of this day in Brussels was to reflect on it and check in with people and update people on what's going on with it. So they had lots of different people, both people who've done ECIs and the Commission and MEPs come together to kind of share their experiences and reflections. So I learned a lot that day, and I'm just going to share a couple of things with you, and maybe I can help you ongoing with where to get further information and who are good people to talk to, because I met quite a few people there that could be good supports to us in our own campaign. So I can be a point of contact, I guess, for you guys with these people and with anyone else that's helpful for the campaign. So I have a little handout here. So that is basically the presentation. So you can just hand that around, and we just chat through those, I guess, and then maybe we can have a bit of a discussion. And I don't think I can answer all of your questions, but I can hopefully think about where we can find out the answers to your questions. And I know that later on today that you're going to split into smaller groups and think about different things like to do with the campaign. So this might give you some lead towards that discussion that you're going to have later on. Okay, so as I said, it was brought in with the Lisbon Treaty. And I think part of the whole idea with bringing this in was to increase participation in European citizens in what decisions are made at European level. So there was quite, I think if you remember back to the Lisbon Treaty, there was quite a lot of discussion around it, and there's quite a bit of resistance towards decision making going further and further away from the people that are affected by those decisions. So the European Citizens Initiative was introduced, and it was a way for citizens to have their say. This is how it's been described. So the key thing that you'll always hear with the ECI is 1 million signatures. So this is the target. To have a successful ECI, you need to gather 1 million signatures from European citizens. And you think there's 250 million or so in the European Union. That too hard, could it? So the signatures need to come from across the European Union. They can't all just come from one country. And also the organisers of the European Citizens Initiative need to come from at least 7 member states. So what they say is they want people to form a committee of citizens. So at least 7 people from 7 different member states to come together and form a committee. And that committee then submit their idea for a European Citizens Initiative to the Commission. So that's the idea, and then the Commission says go ahead, and then you collect 1 million signatures. So far, so straightforward. Right? Okay, so another key feature is that it must be within the competence of the EU. So, what do they mean by competence? Has anyone here a background or experience in European stuff, or yeah?
Yeah,
You do.
I did politics in my BA, and then I did international public policy and economics in my masters.
Okay.
So we visited Brussels, so I think I might have gotten an idea because we went into a lot of different agencies and stuff.
Fantastic.
That's under their remit.
Yeah, and it's great to actually go there in person as well.
Yeah,
And
it is actually, yeah.
see how it all works. That's fantastic. So you know a little bit about Commission and the Parliament and the Council and the relationship.
Yeah, not so much about ECI like at all, to be honest.
Okay.
But
Well, that's going to be really helpful.
Yeah.
The institutional framework, the setup there, the landscape, that's really helpful. Anyone else kind of learned a little bit about that, or?
A little bit of knowledge.
Yeah. What kind of background did you? What context did you?
Well, like Martin Schulz was over this week, the President of Parliament, and I was campaigning with him and stuff.
Okay.
And I've been in Brussels. I was in Brussels last month or the month before, Emer Costello. So a little bit. Like, I know a bit about the Parliament, the Commission, and things like that. But again, I wouldn't know really anything about guys.
Great. That's perfect. So you don't need to know anything about ECIs because we're coming at it completely new. But background and knowledge of how the EU works is going to be definitely quite useful. So when they say within the competence of the EU, then I guess, girls, you kind of know that's about, well, can the EU actually make any decisions about this? So what kind of things do you know about that are within the competence of the EU?
I mean, a lot of stuff is really, I always think in one of our classes last year we had like that, it's everything from like the butter vouchers to jam and jar labelling and, all the way up to like, company law and kind of, so that it does actually have a pretty big remit. Like, when people say it doesn't affect us here down in Cork or whatever, but it actually does because everything's standardised now and everything goes through. So that's how I would think of it anyway. I don't know my other lister. Yeah.
Okay, that's really good. Yeah, brilliant. To me, like, this is all new as well. So I was kind of thinking, gosh, what is within competence? But basically, there are key policy areas which I'll mention before we finish the presentation that the EU has responsibility to legislate for, and that's what they want people to sort of submit ECIs in relation to. So when we're thinking about our ECI, we need to think, okay, is this actually something they can do something about concretely? And if not, do we still want to do it, or do we want to change the way we approach it? So that's just one thing to bear in mind. So the final key feature is that it has to be possible to propose legislation. Now, maybe it doesn't have to be about legislation, but basically that is the idea with the ECI, is that it's introduced so that citizens can actually affect legislation, so the laws, so that, real actual change can be made. Miles. I'll just close the door there. Can I just check him for 1 second? Yeah. He's got strong feelings about the EU. Can I pause this? No. I just continue. Can I pause it? Just answer it again. And he'll be fine. He's going to join us for a little while in the news, okay? He loves people. Okay, I'll just keep going if that's alright. Please tell me. Yeah. Oh boy. You can play with Mr. Fox. Okay, so I wanted to just chat about these kind of key questions that I have in this slide, because this was what was brought up at the ECI day that I was at in Brussels. It was a real learning curve for me, because learning about the ECI, straight away for the first time, and then hearing all the kind of experiences that people who've run ECIs have done, and the experiences of people in the Parliament, the Commission, all the different perspectives. Emily O'Reilly, who's Irish, and she's the European Ombudsman, she presented at this day, and she had an interesting perspective because she has a particular role actually to look at the ECI, because she looks out for the interests of the EU citizens, and she's preparing her own report on this about whether it really does achieve what it set out to achieve, and what are the barriers to, what are some of the challenges and how can they be overcome. So this thing called the legitimacy gap, I think, is something that was discussed a lot on that day and is a big issue at European level, and it's something, it basically is about whether the EU is a legitimate decision-making body for citizens. Does it really represent us, you know, and that kind of thing. So this is a big discussion, and does the ECI actually bridge this gap between citizens and the decisions that affect them? That's a key question, and I think that's a good one for us to bear in mind, because the focus of our campaign is definitely going to be something related to the participation of young people in decisions that affect them. Justice, social equality, those kind of issues. So I think even the ECI itself is an interesting subject for us to look at in the context of the project that we're doing. So is it really improving democracy? What do you think, Liz? Yeah, he's got strong opinions. Okay, second question that I want us to think about is, okay, is it really possible for a group of 7 citizens to undertake this? There were huge questions raised in relation to this at the review in April, and the reason is that actually there are quite a lot of bureaucratic challenges. Now, I don't want us to get obsessed with the bureaucracy and the red tape right now, because we will have to overcome it, but there are significant bureaucratic challenges, and it begs the question, is it really possible for just 7 voluntary people to come together and do this, you know, with a set of volunteers? Or is this really actually something for big organisations to undertake? And, you know, with the resources of PR and media and marketing budget and all that kind of thing. You know, can you really do it with no money, for example? And I'll point to a resource that it actually sums up everything that you need to know, that you can read afterwards. It gives all the examples of ECIs that have ever taken place, and some of them were actually done by groups of volunteers, and some of them were done with the support of large international networks and organisations. And quite a few of them said, look, if you don't have money behind you, if you don't have an infrastructure behind you, this isn't possible. Because, okay, for one reason, and this is, I suppose, my way of also introducing some of the technical aspects of the ECI, you must get at least 7 member states, citizens in 7 member states to sign. And there's quotas for each of those. So, for example, I think it's 9,000 in Ireland.
Is the minimum?
Yeah.
The maximum?
There's no maximum. You can have as many as you want. If we've got all 4 million people in Ireland, that'd be brilliant. But it's to do with kind of like a percentage of the population of each country that they want to show. Now, if you get over the million, over 7 countries, then that's good. But if one of those 7 countries is below the quota, then it's not enough, essentially. So there's the kind of technical things to make sure that it really is just an EU-wide, it reflects citizens' needs across the EU. There's 28 member states in Europe. There's how many different languages? Millions of different languages. You need to communicate your message in all of those member states. You need to present your ECI in all of those member states. You need to translate it into their language, and you need to relate it to their experiences. So there's a huge amount of communication needs that are required around the ECI. So can you imagine if a bunch of volunteers got together to do this, there would be a lot of things that need to be done. Another question, is signature collection across 28 member states feasible? Okay, so this is by far the biggest challenge that every ECI has faced, collecting signatures. There are 2 ways to collect signatures, with paper forms and online. The EU Commission has developed an online collection system, the OCS, that people can use, and it is cumbersome to use. So this has created barriers for people in the past. People who've done ECIs in the past have been delayed because of the difficulties in setting this up. One of the key difficulties here is that there are different signing requirements for each member state. So each member state might require something different, like in Poland it might be your name, your address, your email address, your social security number. In Italy it might be your name, your address, your email address, your passport number. So if you were signing something online, can you imagine, and you got directed to this, that might stop you from signing if you're asked to. Especially in countries where there are sometimes issues about data protection. So this is a big issue. And we can get into the details of it, but I think that we should flag it right now as that's going to be a big challenge. Now, is it an agenda setting tool or is it a policy / legislative tool? So is it really about proposing and changing legislation, or is it just about getting issues debated at an EU level? That's a big question as well. And is it bad if it's not a legislative tool? Maybe it's okay if it's actually just about getting things discussed at the Parliament, Council, Commission level. And I think the result of a case study that I'd like to show you, or that you can look at yourself later, the right to water is the first successful, I think maybe you've discussed it before, have you? No? Okay, so the right to water was an ECI and it's the first successful one. And they got 1,800,000 signatures, which is amazing. And they went and they had their hearing at the Parliament and the Commission, and since then, really the Commission have responded with a kind of a, okay, that's nice, but we're not really going to propose any legislation about that. So this is hugely disappointing for the campaign organisers because they had very clear requests and they feel now that nothing's going to be done about it. So that's something to bear in mind. One of the points made at this day in Brussels was like, okay, well, maybe it isn't going to change legislation, but look at the awareness raising that's happening as a result of the successful ECIs. They've been debated at European level, they've gotten huge coverage in media, nationally, across Europe, and the issues that they care about are now on the agenda, and they have a huge platform to go further with that. So, if you accept that you're not going to change legislation, perhaps with your ECI, but you have other targets, you have other goals in mind, then this can work for you. Okay, so that's one thing for us to bear in mind as we design our campaign and think about it. And finally, another key question is how will it be reformed in April 2015? Now, one thing they said at this day in Brussels was that actually the amount of applications for ECIs has gone down by 40%, and I wonder, is it something to do with the fact that it's going to be reformed in April next year, and maybe people are waiting until those reforms come in, because there are obvious sort of problems with the online collection system and things like that. So how that reform takes place and whether it will really make a big difference is another big question. And, to me, it seemed that the Commission were very tight-lipped about what they will actually do to reform the ECI. They think it's grand, seems. Do they really want change? Maybe they don't. Maybe they're throwing all these bureaucratic hurdles in the way of people deliberately, and they really don't want concrete change coming from citizens. But that's me being a sort of conspiracy theorist. But there are certain things that will be changed in April. So that won't affect us, but it will be during the lifetime of our campaign. So we might need to think about will it actually will it be possible for it to affect our the technical aspects of our campaign mainly. But it will put it on the agenda. There'll be a big discussion about it Europe-wide, so that's something that maybe we could leverage to increase the promotion of our campaign. So then just a quick summary about the ECI so far, just so you get a sense of what has happened with it so far. 20 ECIs have been completed, 40 were actually proposed to the Commission, but 17 were rejected, and overwhelmingly the reason for the rejection is not within the competence of the EU, with very little explanation. So it's not terribly supportive environment. Citizens have come together, they've put together a proposal, and then the EU kind of come back and said, no, it's not really within our competence, without the kind of like suggestions of if you changed it in this way, maybe it would be, or whatever. So that's something that definitely does need to be reformed. But it's for us to think about as well that we need to really have this all worked out kind of in advance. Otherwise, there are going to be delays going back and forth. One campaign that we talked to, which was around providing a basic income for people, like an unconditional basic income. They submitted something. They were just voluntary committee, and they submitted something, and the EC just sent it back and said, look, it's not within our competence. We don't tell national governments how to do their social welfare policies or whatever. So they reframed it within, we want a debate about unconditional basic income to take place across Europe, leading from Europe and affecting national governments. And that was accepted, and they ran their ECI, and they did very well. They got about, yeah, you think that's a good idea, don't you? They got about 250,000 signatures and huge levels of awareness. And then, and in this summary document that I'll give you the link for, there's a big gap. So 20 ECIs have run, but like quite a lot of them only collected maybe 3,000 signatures. Okay, so they didn't get the momentum behind them. Do you want to go over and talk to Laura? That's a good idea. She's a lovely girl. So either they got the ECI through and then they realised, oh my goodness, this is too much for us, and the momentum died. So so maybe they had great plans at the start, but then they didn't have the planning to see them through. So that's something for us to think about as well. How will this run? Maybe one of the things I should have said in the key features is that it's 12 months. You can collect signatures for 12 months. Okay, and so you need to think about that. That's the time that your online collection system is up and running. Sorry, it's actually the time from when you're granted. You said you can go ahead. It's not the time from when you can collect signatures. There could be a gap between when we actually get the system for collecting signatures working and when we've been allowed to start our campaign. So that's something to bear in mind. 5 million signatures from EU citizens have been collected over the 20 ECIs that have been done. So you can see that there have been 3 successful ones, including the Right to Water, which got 1.8 million signatures. So obviously that's a huge, so there's a lot of ECIs that have run and got very, very few signatures. So the 3 successful ones, Right to Water. Maybe I'll just describe those briefly, and you can research them yourselves later, because they have interesting differences that's good for us to consider. So Right to Water was run by a network of trade unions. So it's a very well networked, well organised, non-governmental trade union running this campaign. They have representatives all over Europe. They were very well organised. They had a good budget, good communications, and they kind of consistent campaign for over the 12 months. They did have a 3-month delay with the online collection system, but they still managed to collect 1.8 million signatures, so they did really, really well.
What were they calling for?
Sorry, so they were asking for 3 different things. Basically, the right to water being enshrined as a human right within EU legislation. What was the middle one? Anyway, it was mainly to do with water privatisation. So they were calling for a halt to water privatisation across Europe.
And it didn't happen in the end?
No. They're still waiting for a concrete response from the Commission, essentially. So you can go on to them. They've been well interested in talking to us as well and giving us the kind of feedback on what happened at the hearing and stuff as well.
It's interesting with Ireland as well, the water charges coming
Yeah. It's very relevant. Yeah, very relevant, So, and I think interesting for a trade union to take up that issue. The other one was One of Us. Very interesting one, this one. They were calling for stem cell research using human embryos to be banned. They succeeded in getting over 1 million signatures. They were very much a voluntary organisation, but church-led organisation. So Pope Francis endorsed their campaign, and that just, really helped it. They were also calling for, within that, they were also calling for Europe Aid, so the European body that gives aid to developing countries, to ban any aid that supported abortions in third world countries, or maternal health that involved certain things that they didn't agree with. So there was kind of multiple dimensions to their campaign, but the human embryo research was the kind of focus that they used because it's something that the EU has competence over. So
yeah, I was going to say with the developing world, so the EU will have competence over it. They only granting the aid.
With the aid granting.
Yeah.
So the EU could say none of our aid is to go to certain activities. Yeah, that's within the European competence. So very interesting campaign in that they collected most of their signatures in paper, going out in person, huge numbers of volunteers in person collecting signatures on paper. And the third one was stop vivisection, which is basically to stop certain types of animal experiments. And it was run by a network of mainly voluntary animal rights organisations. And they collected most of their signatures in Italy. And I think they were voluntary, but they had a very good network as well. So 3 very different, interesting, successful ECIs to look at. There's the resource that I wanted to share with you is called an ECI that works. It's a website and a report, and you can download the report for free. And I just downloaded this section of it, or I just printed this section of it for you to have a look at in your discussions later on. It's just an overview of the ECIs that have taken place. So it lists all of them. Gives their website and tells you how many signatures they collected. It's quite a good, useful overview. You can see like the range of things that have been submitted, and they give you just a little bit of overview on, kind of a little bit of insight into the statistics. The rest of the I'll just show you this one. Look, these little graphs you can probably see from here are how signatures were collected, the rate of signature collection over time, and you can see that the right to water goes steeply up at this point, and that was because they were featured on a German TV show, and they got a huge amount of media coverage, and at one point something, quite a significant percentage of their signatures were collected in Germany, actually. So that's something to think about. This one you can see, and this one, these are the One of Us campaign on banning human embryo research, and this is the Stop Vivisection. You can see those have more steady climbs, and they basically just, really increased the work on the campaigns towards the end. So that the first few months they really didn't collect much at all, and then they started to build momentum. And by literally, like say the One of Us one, going to other countries, speaking to people in person, building volunteers on the ground, a lot of time went into it, a lot of human resources. But I guess that's because there's a huge passion for the topic with that group. You can see there 63% of signatures collected online and 37% offline. That's quite a lot. Paper signatures, I would have thought, but might be easier to collect paper signatures given the technical barriers. So I think I'll leave my presentation there, and maybe we can have a chat about some of the questions that come up for you right now. And I think it's just, I would say read this document, an ECI that works, because if you read that, it's really easy, it's really accessible. I think you will have a really clear understanding of the ECI afterwards. Also, most of the people that have run ECIs are really approachable and really helpful, and you can get in touch with them and ask them. We've spoke to a few of them already, so we've made contact with quite a few of them, and they'd be really willing to help if we have specific questions around that. So yeah, I think I'll just come back to what I said at the beginning. Now is the time for us to clarify our purpose. So now is the time for us to really spend some quality thinking time about what it is that we really, what is the result at the end that we want. And this as a tool, given its limits and its opportunities, how is that going to help us to achieve our results? Whether we get a million signatures or not. So, yeah, I'll leave it there. Thank you for listening.